Deep Dive Film School makes no claim of ownership of the film footage used in this episode. The film footage is owned entirely by the copyright holders. Deep Dive Film School uses the footage only for purposes of education, commentary, and criticism under fair use. Also, we're going to spoil the hell out of this movie, so this is your warning. Welcome to Deep Dive Film School!
This week we are going to finish out our Richard Linklater Festival with 2014's Boyhood.
Let's dive on in. All right, everybody, I am Adam Sherlock.
And I'm Adam Pulcher.
Please make sure to like and subscribe if you like what you see /hear. Please go follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook.
All
we're still under
channels.
the old show, but we have everything
Yeah,
up
we
here.
need to talk about that.
I know, they
Fuck
just won't.
Facebook.
I think it's the school thing, which I understand.
I know,
It's like
yeah,
if
I
you're
get it.
following a podcast and you're like, now they think they're a college. And it's like, no, it's a clever name. It's fine.
Yeah.
But they're like, ooh, no, look, if you're a politician, you can literally say the earth is flat. But if you're a podcast and you try to be a
dare
school,
you.
how dare
Fake
you?
someone out.
Fake news. Anyway, so this is the final installment of our Linklater Festival.
Yeah. What do you think of the fest so far? Are you
I
kind
think-
of an interesting director that we've never really
I think I
talked
realized
that much about?
I think I realized that not that I've ever disliked the movies that he's made,
Yeah, me neither.
or anything like that, but I think he is a much more cerebral director than I ever gave him credit for.
Definitely.
I
No
think
doubt.
he does passages of time movies, and every once in a while he'll do
Yep.
just like a straight up like a movie like Bernie.
Yeah.
Is kind of
And
just a
he's really good at that.
movie, and so is School
Didn't
of
he do
Rock.
School of
and,
Rock? Yeah.
and so he's really good at those.
He
but
can do a little bit of everything.
his passion projects, though, are these
Yeah.
stream of consciousness. Most of them don't have a plot to speak of, even the funny ones, right? Even a Dazed
This
and Confused.
movie today doesn't really have a plot. That was something I was going to mention.
It made me realize that, and it's funny. I'm gonna do a minor tangent right here at the very beginning, but
We love your tangents.
in the last week, I watched Boyhood, and that was the first time I'd seen it. And I also watched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And what I
Excellent.
realized is that these different these ways of making movies that you know, they're not some crazy art film like Begotten or Craymaster Cycle. They're not those, but what they are is a different way of telling a story. I think that the last handful of Tarantino films, for the most part, have been this totally different way of telling a story that does not have an arc in a classic structure. It doesn't have a classic climax. There might be like a more bigger bombastic scene towards the end of the movie, but you look at things like Inglourious Bastards, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, or Django Unchained, and you go, these do not have classic arcs at all. Like, they're vignettes that are stuck together in this way. And I think that I'm like, boy, that's such an interesting, unique way of telling a story. And I've realized Linklater has something. It's not vignette based, but it's almost this. It's a more interesting, and you know, you mentioned a couple movies ago, Gus Van Sant, Stream of Consciousness,
Yeah.
and
He can
I think
do the
Linklater
bigger things
does
if he
that.
needs to.
Yeah, but his are more interesting, or his are more fun to watch. They're more enjoyable.
Yeah, you know, I'm totally with you on the same wavelength about Linklater himself. You know, someone I always liked and respected, but nothing I was like really seeking out, and I didn't know that much about him. So it was really fun to visit his film and see where something like Dazed and Confused came from.
Yeah.
And some of his bigger stuff that's a bit more accessible. And I don't think Slacker's necessarily for everybody. But I think those are his, like you said, his prize projects, the ones he really thinks about, and really, like, he's writing most of these movies too.
Totally.
So this is all coming from his brain and his personal experience.
He's getting better at it.
Yeah.
The older that he gets, so that by this age, for him to tackle something like Boyhood makes perfect sense.
Absolutely. And you know, I don't love every one of his movies by any means, but I like something about each one of them.
Right.
And some of them I definitely love. Boyhood being one of them. I think it's a historical achievement in filmmaking. The way that we're supposed to adapt to them changing over these 12 years and basically getting Ashton and him from about grade school to college years.
The actor,
his name is Eller Coltrane.
Yes.
And then of course we got Patricia Arquette and Ethan Hawke in here. And Ethan Hawke obviously a regular. This kind of funny because we've done all these other movies, and was Ethan Hawke? No, he wasn't. Yeah, this is the first time we have an Ethan Hawke, Richard Linklater.
Even though obviously, like, the two of them are really good friends.
Absolutely.
They've worked together on the Before series. Like, they've done a lot of projects together. And it's funny too. The other director that this festival made me think of, even though this is their movies are not similar at all. But what's the name of the director that did Take Shelter?
Mike Nichols.
Mike Nichols.
Yeah.
Just in this sense of, like, there are these directors that their first one or two films, they're obviously telling stories about themselves, and so they're talking about, like, the town they came from, and they have, like, a little troupe of actors that they use, right? And you go,
Michael Shannon in his case.
Yeah. But again, Texas, right? With Mike Nichols. And so it's just sort of like this niche idea that's really fun. And here we see that even with Boyhood, where Linklater's been making movies since 1990, and this movie still takes place in Texas.
Yeah.
Right? And it still very much is has this feeling that's about this sort of Generation X 90s kid now that is a parent,
Any Kevin Smith movie takes place in
New Jersey. Yep, exactly. I love that, though. I think that's like, it's fun to see those
John
fingerprints.
Hughes does it too, right?
Yeah.
I think it's a thing.
Shermer, Illinois. Yeah.
You write what you know.
Mm-hmm, exactly. And I just like seeing those fingerprints even after so many years and so many things changing.
This movie, for me, again, like I said, I think it's an achievement because of the way it makes you feel as it's evolving. You're like, I've never seen this before on film. And
yeah, it's incredibly unique.
It really is, and I can't overstate this enough, and I probably will by the end of this review. But the way that they evolved everyone, and so everyone's aging in 12 years here, and so they get together. I think it was once a year to shoot a handful of scenes, depending on, one year may be heavier than others because we do get him a little older. He's a little kid for just a little while.
Yeah, they said that
I don't even think he knew that this was going to work or not.
Totally. Well, and I mean, and that was one thing I read in a lot of reviews after I watched the movie was these people being like, the stars aligned for him to find this kid.
Yeah.
That this kid ended up being somebody who, both in his acting skills as he began to really become a better actor, as well as just like the look of the kid, like he has a magnetic look to him.
For sure.
That you're like, yeah, what if he grew up like Haley Joel Osment, where you're like, by the time that he's 14, you're like, ew.
No, I mean, that's definitely
like,
a risk.
That's a total risk.
If I was him, I would be paying for that kid to have acting classes
the whole time.
Just the whole time. Just say, hey, just keep up on this.
Well, Linklater even said in a moment, he said, I remembered when this definitive point where it was like around the time that he was about 12, 13, that he was like, all of a sudden we came back and got back together, and like he had a lot more input about his character and about what he wanted to do. And he was like, all of a sudden, and I mean, you're a parent, I'm sure that you can relate to this feeling, but he goes, all of a sudden, like, he was this person with like opinions, and he liked Radiohead, and he had thoughts about politics, and he's like, and I went, oh my god, yeah. And he's like, at that point he really started taking more initiative of being an actor. And I just thought, that's got to be such a weird experience for a director, where it's like, you're not this kid's parent or teacher or anything, and you're just watching them like become individualized, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's got to be a trippy experience. Just writing this probably has to be as well. Like, are you writing with thoughts in mind, and then you meet Eller and see how he's changed, and do you want to start leaning into what he's about?
And apparently what Linklater said about that was that he had some ideas to begin with, but I love this. There was this interview with Ethan Hawke, and he said, that Linklater wanted to make this movie about childhood and growing up, And he said it was right around the time that Ethan Hawke's son was born. And so he was like, yeah, I want to be into that. And he's like, well, it's going to take 12 years. And he's like, okay. But then they started talking about the idea of like, you know, they were talking about a lot of different kinds of movies and being like, dude, this would be amazing if we could pull this thing off.
And it's not just makeup.
It's not makeup, but you're actually
it's
like,
you.
yeah. And so they were talking about ideas for a plot. And then eventually Linklater came back to Ethan Hawke and said, I don't think there should be a plot. And he's like, let's just have the movie be about growing up. Let's just have like whatever is happening at that period of time. He said there was a couple of these real miracle moments where, seeing Mason's real ranting about Facebook early on. He's like, at that period of time, like, this is way before any of the privacy issues with Facebook. It was just like a piece of dialogue I wrote for him to say with his help, with the actor's help.
Yeah.
And he's like, and it became really prescient. And he's like, same thing with a lot of the stuff about the Iraq War, about Obama. Like, we were doing that stuff at the period of time just because we were like, this feels timely, without ever stopping to think like, oh, this is actually really significant.
I think the reason this movie works without a plot is because they were able to capture that time so well.
Yes.
And they could have easily resorted to the basic tropes you go through childhood, and they do a little bit, but it's never too in your face about one certain thing.
There's no first kisses, first cigarettes, first time having
it just
sex,
happens. Like
finding out that Santa isn't real. Like, none of that's here.
One year, like, he shows up at his 15th birthday party, and his mom's like, have you been smoking and drinking? And he's like, yeah.
And she's like,
you're just
okay,
like,
and kind of rolls her eyes, and it's like, it's not this big
it doesn't
knock
turn
you over
into
the head.
that's not what the movie is. But for me, one of the greatest achievements outside of the actors just evolving, in real time, is how quickly we're supposed to accept the time changes. Like, you just cut to a scene, and he just shaved his head in the last scene, and he's got a full head of hair, long hair, in this next one. Like, oh shit, a bunch of time just passed. Okay,
right.
We got to kind of keep up with this movie, so it keeps you intrigued that way. But they do such a wonderful job of kind of nailing down the years.
Totally.
Because like through
music cues,
through everything,
definitely.
like when Do You Realize by Flaming Lips comes on, I'm like, I remember that year. I know that year. Like, even when it starts off with Yellow and Coldplay, you're like, yeah, I totally remember that.
Of course, this is 2002.
But they're also watching, we go through the Obama election. We're watching, the very first Funny or Die video with Will Ferrell.
Yep.
And just shit like that. And we capture the insaneness of Harry Potter, and when that became a thing.
Getting
like,
the book signed and
doing
all
of this stuff that I'm like, I wasn't his age, but I totally know that time. And you're putting me in there by inserting these little cultural things. And it's like, because it's every year, it's so deep with me because it was just a natural evolution. And I'm like, I feel like I went through that movie with him. And so I don't know if this will be as effective for some people that don't know that time as well. Because, at some point this movie will maybe feel dated, right? Because it is so specific to the time and the culture of the times. But for me, holy shit. Every time something like that popped up, I'm like, thank you, yes. And it's just like a subtle little thing that you're not thinking about that they insert there. And it just made it that much better for me because of that.
Oh, I totally agree. Well, and I think I completely agree. And I think that this idea that you were just talking about of the last scene, his first horrible stepfather has forced him to shave his head.
Yeah.
And then the next scene that we see him in, he's obviously like 2 inches taller and he has long hair again, right? And we go, oh my God, time has passed.
Yeah, so they've lived together like 2 years now.
Yeah, but it feels, if in that moment where we see him and he's older, and
that guy is such an asshole too.
Oh, that the professor, he's spooky. Like he has whoever that actor is, whatever the casting was for that guy, he's great because he has such resting crazy face that you're like, ooh, no, something's wrong. He's drinking too much or whatever.
Yeah.
But what I was going to say is that if it then pivoted to, oh, time has passed and now Mason's going to learn another lesson. Right, that would feel really tacked on and really corny, right? And the fact that, and I think Linklater even plays with this a little bit. Like, again, fast forwarding quite a bit, but he goes on this trip to Austin to go and see his sister, and he kind of lies and he brings his girlfriend along, and there's even a sort of tacked on early moment where Patricia Arquette's like, don't be texting while you're driving and all this. And when they're in their car and he's bitching about Facebook, she's talking about, oh, well, my friend just sent me this picture of a miniature pig, look. And for a split second there, you have the heightened anxiety that, oh my God, is this where he wrecks his car and accidentally kills his girlfriend or some big monumental thing, which would normally happen in a movie. Yeah. But it's almost
not
like
in a real movie about
not
real
in a
life.
movie about real life. And so Linklater almost sprinkles in things like that. Or when Shitty Stepdad number 2 gets up in his face after he's been drinking a bunch, and you're like,
Patricia
oh my God,
Arquette, you need to make better choices.
Exactly. And you're like, oh, this is, no doubt, right? I know. And it's so sad too, because you like her character so much, and that's another very realism kind of moment of like
we have to talk about her,
and we'll get into it, but just that idea of like that confrontation of drunk stepdad number 2 getting, the army vet getting in his face for a second, and it does what most people's lives do, and for those who don't, like, it's super unfortunate and awful if they do end up with somebody abusive in their household. But I think just the fact that he stands up to me, he's like, you're not my dad, and he walks in the house, and the next scene that we see, they've divorced and he's gone. And I'm like, that is so much more interesting, because because otherwise it would feel like an after school special. It would feel like a series of vignettes that are all after school specials, instead of just feeling like we're kind of just living in this kid's head.
I'm so happy.
So
where would you put this in the pantheon of Linklater stuff? How much did you like it? Or
I mean, well, first of all, I absolutely loved it, and I loved it on a couple of different levels. I loved it that this might sound weird. I loved that I didn't love all of it. I loved that there were moments that felt, when he's a little boy and he's sitting, in that space between the fence and behind the shed, throwing rocks, and he's just by himself. And it's like, that's so much of your childhood. So much of your childhood is sad. Yeah. It reminded me of Where the Wild Things Are. It's like this feeling of like this loneliness that only an 8-year-old can feel sometimes,
but
because
not
you're
anymore,
kind of just
because they have a phone.
Right, exactly. Well, and I mean, I think kids even do that now. I think that it's just different, right? But it is this sort of like feeling of not even being able to say goodbye to your best friend, because you're moving right now. And this pull between the memory of what that feels like, but also being at an age now where I can also look at Ethan Hawke's character and really understand like him going from being like this dude who's going to play in a band for the rest of his life to selling the insurance that his father did and getting, selling the GTO for a minivan, right? Like, for sure, just that growth and being able to walk that tightrope back and forth from what both of those places felt like. Yeah. Because I remember, do you remember that movie, The Messengers? It was a horror movie. And it was like the first movie that Kristen Stewart was ever in, I think. And like they move into a farmhouse, and like, the farmhouse is haunted or something. And I want to say it's Dylan McDermott that plays her dad. And it was the first time. And so this would probably be like in 2006 or 2007, around there when it came out, I think. But whatever. I just remember renting it from Blockbuster and watching it and for the first time being like, I don't identify with the child anymore. I don't identify with this stupid teenager who's like bitching about how she had to leave her school and all of her friends. Like, I identify with Dylan McDermott's character, because I'm like, yeah, man, like, you don't know what it's like. Like, he had to get a new job in a different town, you asshole. And I remembered feeling like, oh my God, I've eclipsed into a new realm. And so usually in movies, you side with one set of characters or the other, and it's either the kids you side with, or the parents.
There's a few boyfriend choices that were like, what the hell? But for the most part, like, it, first off, their relationship is really interesting, and it's a great thread that we can keep moving throughout the movie. And if there's any plot, it's probably their relationship, right? Or
Ethan Hawke and Patricia Arquette, definitely.
And even though like we maybe get 2 scenes of them together, which is kind of crazy. They have this one amazing scene at the end where he totally just acknowledges like, thank you for being a fucking awesome mom and raising awesome kids.
And then he still blows it because he offers to give her money for the party, but then he doesn't have any on him, so he's like, I'll go get her purse.
Yeah.
And you're just like, that's
he still
perfect.
has that adolescent side to him,
But
right?
that's no, and I totally agree.
But their relationship, I wish we had a little more of them together, just because they're two great actors. Patricia Arquette is fucking amazing here.
Oh, she's incredible.
I think she won Academy Award. If
she
not,
did.
she was nominated.
I'm pretty sure I think she won for Best Supporting Actress.
Yeah. She's so good here, and her evolution.
It's a thankless
no
role.
Doubt. She shows how hard it is to be a single mother, just a single parent in general. Like, there's parts where you're like, yeah, raising kids is hard and stressful and crazy. And she kind of already has a little bit of a crazy look to her sometimes,
She
which
definitely
is probably
does.
why she goes for the assholes.
Yeah.
But you believe her, and she's a real person here. And man, she was just fantastic throughout. That's got to be hard to go back every year. Like, Ethan Hawke is pretty much playing Ethan Hawke in every movie. Eller Coltrane is just being himself, honestly, through this whole movie. So,
Yeah.
but she's really acting and being a character.
Well, and you have to imagine also that this feeling, this and this is one of the ones that I do think is kind of it has the possibility to be a cliche moment, and it's when he's going off to college.
Yeah.
But instead, what she says is so brilliant, where she just says, you know what I'm realizing? My life's just going to go like that. A series of milestones: getting married, having kids, getting divorced. That time we thought that you were dyslexic. When I taught you how to ride a bike, getting divorced again, getting my master's degree, finally getting the job I wanted, sending Samantha off to school, sending you off to college. And you know what's next, huh? It's my fucking funeral. Just go and leave me my picture. And Mason says, aren't you jumping ahead by like 40 years or something? And she says, I just thought there would be more.
Yeah.
And I couldn't help but think how much of that is not just what they decided to have her characters say, but potentially the way that Patricia Arquette, as an aging woman in Hollywood, probably feels anyway.
Sure.
Right? Like, I didn't know, like, now, like, I feel old, right? And, like, I didn't know, like, when did that happen? I thought there'd be more before we got to this point where I'm sending this kid off to college, right? Like, how did this happen, right? Like, and I love that there's that realism there, and we see the same realism with Ethan Hawke's character too, and in this way of just being like, I don't know, you try to do the best you can and don't get a crappy
he's a great
job.
Dad.
And,
he's an awesome dad, like cool dad, progressive dad. You know, he wants to talk to them about sex.
And
you know,
still
their
kind
daughter
of
too, Sam. That's Linklater's daughter, which is
that's
kind
right.
of interesting.
Lorelei Linklater.
Yeah, that's a good name, actually. Yeah.
But I think that there is this idea of while saying all that about Ethan Hawke's character, he's also kind of the deadbeat dad, right?
Sure.
He's just there
Well, he
when it's
evolves
convenient.
into the what does he say to Patricia Arquette, or maybe it was someone else he said it to, but you know, I probably became the square that she wanted me to be.
Exactly.
When we were at the beginning. And I'm like,
yeah. You finally did.
It
You
happens.
became the square. Yeah.
You got the minivan and everything.
And I love that, you know, this minivan conversation with Mason, where he's like, you said that the car was going to be mine.
Yeah.
And it's like, that is this is part of the reason why childhood can be so traumatic, I think, is that these little moments that to the adult is just like a fart in the wind, where they're like, yeah, blah, 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 kid. And it's like, that's the moment. This is part of the reason why I don't have kids. Because I'm like, when is the thing that I just offhandedly say that's going to just like break that kid's heart 10 years from now and that they won't forget? And you're just I don't
even want to know the answer to that.
I know, right? It's terrifying. It's a terrifying thought. But again, I think that there takes this real nuanced hand to be able to project that in a way that feels meaningful without feeling heavy-handed. And I think that's one of the reasons why, to a lot of people, this movie was so fantastic, whereas at the same time, to a lot of other people, like, you know, there's totally like whatever Amazon and Netflix reviews and things like that out there where people are like, nothing happened. And you're like, well, this happened.
I don't understand that person.
12 years happened. Well, okay, so, and this is what
I get it, but like I don't relate to you at all. Like, if you watch Boyhood and think nothing happened, I don't have anything to say to you.
So when I used to deliver refrigerators for Best Buy, which is actually a job I used to have, it was a really long time ago, but
Not that long.
me and Dave,
Yes.
and Dave Moss, and then this other kid who was new that we were training. We were like driving along in the truck, and we were like looking for something to listen to, and we found a podcast to listen to, and it was a local podcast called Radio West, and the guy Doug Fabrizio, who was doing the show, did this piece that was like he recorded his daughter like in little snippets over the course of like something like 8 years. And in the beginning she's like a baby, and so he's recording that, and it's this, and so there's this like great like explosions in the sky sound bed music to it, and then we're getting just these little snippets, and the piece is only 2 or 3 minutes long, but it's like by the end of it she's this sassy preteen, right? And in the beginning she can't talk, or barely can talk, like that cute little chipmunky talking voice, and then this music swell, and by the end of it like she's this sassy kind of preteen who has like lots of opinions about things, Dad, and like I don't feel like talking into the recorder right now because I really have to go meet my friends, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, Dave and I were both like near tears, right? It was just such a moving piece, and this new kid was like, I don't get what that's all about, and we looked at him and we were like, what are you talking about? And Dave was like, don't you have kids? And he was like, yeah. And he's like, it just seemed boring. I didn't get what it was supposed to be about. And we're like, passage of time, mortality, like the human race, like, you know, the fleeting
Evolution,
nature
yeah.
of our lives. Like, you didn't get any of that. And he was like, not really. No, I don't, you know. And he was the only one, like, neither Dave nor I have kids. And we didn't then either. We were just like, this didn't affect you? And so I think in this way, it's sort of like, the artistry itself about just the monumental feeling of that, even as somebody who doesn't have kids, like I teach kids, right?
Sure.
And they're kids that
Still
10
relate
years
to someone who
ago,
has a kid.
they're little, adorable little kids that I taught stop motion animation to 10 years ago, that now I see their college pictures on Facebook.
Yeah.
And I'm like, old man nigga, look at my life, you know. Like, it's really hard not to have that feeling, and to see something like this that can feel just heart-achingly real, with, again, in my opinion, not slipping into the Terrence Malick world of like, this is all very meaningful, and being like, okay.
So this is a 3-hour movie. It didn't seem like that affected you one bit. Like, you couldn't even tell. I couldn't tell either.
No. If anything,
it's always
I think
daunting before I started, and I'm like, but once I start watching it, I'm like, oh, I didn't even notice.
And I think that you could really parse this thing out. And I understand why he didn't want to, because he wanted to be stream of consciousness. But even if he had carved it out almost into, you could have done the same thing and carved it out into 4 seasons, right? And have season, the
I don't think it would be as
spring,
effective as a TV show.
No. I don't mean,
you're saying
like literally, like in an artistic way, be like, here's spring, here's summer, here's fall, here's winter. You could have done that and had it be chaptered out like that, but I don't. But it doesn't make a difference. I mean, because I think you could, if you did want to break it up, you could start and stop wherever you wanted to, and there isn't any real crescendos. It really is this stream of consciousness.
So I think I called him Ashton earlier, but it's actually Mason.
Right.
is his name. And he kind of turns, there's this one theme throughout his life that people are like, you need to work harder. You're kind of lazy. Like, you don't seem very motivated. And that side of me I totally related with, because
yes.
I've definitely felt that, especially at the times where he was doing that. And he consistently gets called out for it. So you kind of see that slacker generation of things kind of seeping into what Linklater does here as well, just showing that part a little,
very much
little
so.
bit.
Well, and he becomes a lot like Ethan Hawke. He becomes a lot like his dad. He's this artist. He's a little meandering and a little flighty, but at the same time, there's such an honesty in that I just like. I
agree. Like, he says, take care of yourself and good things will happen in this movie, and that's his Ethan Hawke's philosophy, and is trying to just bring that down to his kids. But I think you're right. He's a lot like his dad.
Well, I love that Mason's own philosophy becomes this idea of, he says, I get it. Like, I can go to college, but like, it doesn't it's just a thing I'm going to do. I don't know that it's going to have any of the real answers for me or even be applicable in what I'm going to do in life.
That makes sense too.
Because he's like, my mom went to college and she's, just as fucking confused as I am, right? And I just love that idea
still has
of like
the same questions.
Yeah, she doesn't know any more than she did before. She could just get a better job or whatever.
Out.
Yeah, and I just think that's such a it's a very realistic kind of outlook, and I think that it's nice to have movies that. It's nice
the world isn't on fire all the time.
Yeah.
Something that doesn't have to make you feel bad.
Well, I kept thinking about The Straight Story, the David Lynch film. And it's like, it's much more this character study about this particular way of life. And it was to make you feel a feeling at the end of it. And another good example would be something like Diner. I think Diner also is more there to make you feel something. And to give you like a real, crystallized piece of time.
Yeah.
I think you could have easily done this exact same movie and still done it over 12 years and done it as a period piece. Like if you were like a total, if you were a nerd on the level of somebody like, whether you're talking about Tarantino or from a writing standpoint, somebody like a Stephen King, who's like, this year, this was the song on the radio, this is the soda that all the kids were drinking, and this is what was on TV, right? Like, you could probably do the same thing and do it as a period piece and go through a la, Forrest Gump, an entire arc of periods of time, right? I guess the difference is that in Forrest Gump, he's at the center of every large event, whereas here, we are just at the center of this family and zero large events.
I love this movie. Again, I think it's a generational achievement.
Yeah.
It's something like you've never seen, but it's just a great snapshot into middle America. Growing up as a kid in middle America, I think the dialogue is amazing. The acting is amazing. It's just so good.
It definitely gets
around.
more Linklater-y in the third section, where we do start to get way more dialogue of him, like sort of the self-actualizing stuff, and he does these little rants that are really funny and clever. We do get sort of a callback to Slacker with the crazy guy talking to himself in the diner booth. And so I was like, oh, now it feels like a Linklater film. Like it kind of didn't for a little while there. Like,
I think it did for the most part. Now, especially knowing
all the rest
a little
of
bit
it,
more about him and kind of what his themes are through all of his movies, because that's always something we discover with these director festivals, right? Is we find something like, okay, Herzog loves nature. Like, that's obvious. Man versus nature.
Yes.
That's his thing.
Yes.
So, just like realizing certain things. And to me, a heady director who really loves the day in a life kind of stuff. Right?
Well, and if you really think about it, we bookended our festival with the two movies that were completely his vision, right?
Sure.
Suburbia, based on a play. Obviously, he's going to add a couple of things, but for the most part, he's going to stay.
I guess.
I mean, it's his interpretation
of Dick, yeah.
But it is lives pretty close. Obviously, the stoner conversation things feel very much like Linklater.
Exactly.
But I do think it's interesting. I don't know that I gave him. I think I oftentimes thought of him as more another one of these directors who started weird and then got really normal. But in retrospect, I don't think so. Maybe there isn't as much of the sort of conspiracy theory-ish kind of weirdo stuff as there was in Slacker or even Waking Life, as in his later work. But I think that, it still is. He likes this stream of consciousness stuff. Yeah. He likes to make a very particular kind of movie that is sort of not about anything.
A lot of them, I feel like you could walk in the middle of them and still enjoy the movie or get what's going on.
Yeah, they're about an idea, right? Again, like My Dinner with Andre. It's like it's about an idea.
Yep. Totally. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for listening and watching this week. Please like and subscribe if you like what you see/hear.
Yep.
And I believe next week we are going to do a Sundance recap of Sundance 2020, going over all my favorite movies, and we're going to have a guest there as well.
That's right.
To talk about that. So look forward to that, and we will see you next week.
Bye, guys. Don't do that. Do one. No, because I have to look at the waveform. You have to do one.
I'm messing it up now.
There we go. So your favorite sports ball team won.
That's right.
Was that that was the Super?
I mean,
that was like the Super Bowl. That's like the one that's the one you win.
I love how you play up your ignorance of sports.
I mean, I do know very little, and
I
so
know that.
I'm like, did they? So for the Super Bowl, you play a series up to it, right?
Yeah, there's like playoffs.
So you win playoffs until you finally get to participate in the Super Bowl.
Yep. It's a bracketed thing.
And then whoever wins that gets a ring, right?
Yep.
Did they get a bowl? Is there an actual Super Bowl? Like
a bowl.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, okay. Is the
Stanley
bowl,
Cup is actually a cup.
I know. This is why I'm asking. So is the bowl?
No.
Sorry. Is the bowl like the stadium? Is that like supposed to be the Super Bowl? That's the bowl.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I think so.
Because then you have like the Rose Bowl, and that's at a particular
it's
stadium,
college, but
right?
yeah, same idea. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, good job.
Yeah.
No, it's just the team. I grew up in a very sportsy household, and so it was a team we watched growing up. So it was kind of cool to see for sure.
And they were the Chiefs.
Yep, Kansas City Chiefs.
Is that like?
Is that in Missouri?
No. I wasn't topical politic jokes with Adam Sherlock and Adam Poulter. No, I was gonna say, is that? Do you think that they ever get the flack that like the Cleveland Indians got?
Oh
or
yeah,
things like?
for
Do
sure.
they? Do they?
For sure.
With the arrowhead and
yeah,
the Chiefs.
Washington
thing.
Redskins, same thing.
Yeah, dude, that's the roughest
Yeah,
one.
no doubt.
I mean, don't get me wrong, the caricature of the Cleveland Indians is pretty rough.
Yeah.
But the Redskins as a name is like, how do we still have that as a name?
Well, and it's such a tribal cultural thing to just love a sports team. That's one like positive thing about sports is that everyone can kind of agree on one thing is that we love this team or whatever.
Right.
It's like a community thing, and there's
for
this
sure.
whole thing built around it, and so getting them to change it is hard because there's so much history with it. But I'm with you.
I mean, isn't that kind of also like, wait, the next Iron Man's going to be black, or like they're making Thor into a woman? It's like it's just a different group of nerds, but they're mad for the same reason, right? So they're like, this cultural appropriation of the thing that I've loved since I was a little boy, and you're like, yeah, but they're called the fucking Redskins, man. Like, it's pretty rough. I don't know. Yeah. Like, why not call them the Pigskins?
Oh, there you go.
This is a football.
Easy.
Hey,
Keep the skins.
you keep the skins part. You can literally keep half the jacket. Just you have to re-screen print the first part of the jacket.
I think you're onto something.
Yeah, so
Just
that
dial
would
'em
cut
up.
down on cost. It all makes perfect sense.
I love it.
Okay.
Go Chiefs.